So what makes me cranky about Shazam? That it isn't a disaster. This is not how it's supposed to work. Shazam is a ridiculous character with a ridiculous costume, and it should make for a Batman and Robin level catastrophe. It's the Superman movie that's supposed to be endearing. It's the Batman vs. Superman movie that should be the one delivering all the geeking out you can handle. It's the Justice League movie that should be the one that has you walking out of the theater with a grin from ear to ear. Not Shazam. Shazam should be the one we're trying to forget, like it was a drunken hookup that we're not proud of. Not virtually the entire DCEU slate to date. Somehow, we live in a dimension where the movie about an orphan kid who meets a wizard that gives him the power to turn into essentially Superman by shouting the word Shazam is the best thing the DC cinematic universe has to offer to date. It's just not right, damn it. How do you screw up Superman and yet do this one right? The short answer is Zack Snyder. But the long answer is this movie embraces the comic book nature of the character rather than trying to run away from it like the DCEU had been trying to do up to this point. It's that old saw I keep harping on about how a consistently fantastical universe works better than a realistic one that will be made inconsistent by the fantastical elements. Because Shazam is fully willing to commit to this goofy idea, it has a genuine charm and fun to it that gets you past the stuff that is necessarily stupid. It's a movie that just says, here are the rules, we know they're wacky, and they make no sense in the real world, but that's what they are. And either you go with that or you don't. It's a lot like Aquaman that way, which I didn't get a chance to review, but suffice it to say I enjoyed quite a bit. That's how messed up the world is today. Aquaman and Shazam have better movies than Superman and Batman right now. To say nothing of the fact that Shazam used to be called Captain Marvel, and his movie is better than Marvel's Captain Marvel, which seems insane considering the recent track record of both cinematic universes. In any case, if you couldn't already tell from the trailers, what you're getting here is essentially all the good parts of the movie Big starring Tom Hanks, and all of the good parts of a superhero origin story just kind of smushed together. It works remarkably well, due in large part to Zach Levi managing to capture a sense of childlike glee without seeming insincere or accidentally slipping into an adult persona from time to time. It would have been very easy for him to come off as, "How do you do, fellow kids?" But he manages to avoid that, and that's great. The scenes where he and his fellow foster kid Freddy are just trying to figure out what kind of powers he has is truly a delight. It's funny, it's charming, it's creative, and it's not all given away by the trailers. They're great sequences that highlight why origin stories work. We all get a vicarious thrill watching someone get to do something superhuman. And unlike most of the people in this DCEU, Billy Batson actually enjoys turning into this adult superhero version of himself and using his powers, even if people haven't figured out what to call him yet. Hell, instead of moping about the difficulty of being a super being, he's having such a good time with it that he's downright irresponsible. And rather than simply gloss over that, as many other movies might, Shazam steers hard into the fact that he doesn't consider the consequences of his actions or think about how he actually should be using his powers. Him being an actual kid helps enormously with that. After all, it's hard to put up with that kind of gross irresponsibility from an adult, but it's pretty much exactly how every teenager acts, so it rings true. And essentially it makes the movie one big allegory for growing up. So ironically, one of the biggest risks of making this movie turned out to be one of its greatest strengths, mainly because the younger actors do a remarkably good job next to their adult counterparts, which, as we all know, is rarely the case. Asher Angel's version of Billy still feels very different from the version that Zach Levi is playing, but having Jack Dylan Grazer's character Freddy as a consistent go-between kind of helps smooth that out quite a bit. Which brings us to some of the things that are not so good about Shazam. The effects are a big one. Some of the CGI on the monsters is incredibly dodgy and often falls into the realm of Sci-Fi Channel movie quality, which is surprising because they didn't need to flush a whole bunch of money away on having Shazam destroy half the city he's supposed to protect like certain other heroes. Fortunately, the main villain is played by Mark Strong, and he's fully human, so you don't have to put up with him too much, but unfortunately, Strong is utterly wasted here. There is some attempt at the beginning to give him something of a sympathetic backstory, but it's quickly tossed out the window for the more typical evil guy is evil cliches. Seems like they wanted him to be a straight man to Shazam's goofball, but ultimately he might as well just have been twirling his mustache the whole time. For the record, this is the second time that DC has wasted Mark Strong as a villain, the other being Sinestro in the Green Lantern movie that Ryan Reynolds has since retconned out of existence in Deadpool. So that makes that twice as bad as it would have been originally. Another issue is that there really isn't enough time with the rest of Billy's foster family to flesh them out enough for the role they play in the climax. We get a few short scenes to know a little bit about each of them, but really most of the time is spent on the relationship between Freddy and Billy, so it doesn't hit as hard as it probably should in the climax because you just didn't really get that good of a sense of who they are. Speaking of kids, sometimes this movie gets remarkably explicit in some of the violence, so keep in mind there are a couple of scenes that might upset the younger ones, even though the rest of the movie is about as kid-friendly as these movies get. I'd say for that under 12 range, you might want to wait for the Blu-ray so you can watch it first, and then just skip through the parts where people get their heads bitten off and that sort of thing. Otherwise, I can actually recommend seeing Shazam in the theater, even at full price. It's just a consistently good time, which also makes it the best the DCEU has to offer so far, since it doesn't have the cringeworthy near fourth wall breaking stuff that Aquaman does, and it doesn't self-destruct in the third act by sacrificing its theme on the altar of garbage CGI like Wonder Woman does. It's pretty much right in the vein of the earlier Marvel flicks, and if we had started off with Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and this one, the DC universe would be in a lot better shape than it is now. Shazam does have two stingers, one during the credits and one at the very end of the credits, so feel free to stick around for those, as that final one is actually pretty funny. So that's what I thought about Shazam anyway. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and subscribe is the magic word that turns all of us YouTube reviewers into superheroes, so make sure to do that if you want me to come rescue you from the bad movies that will undoubtedly come along in the future. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time.